violence, and we have had a disappointing response, shall we say, from the South African Police Services in bringing the perpetrators of this unacceptable level of violence to book. We are also in the process of installing new steam generators at Koeberg, Unit 1 and Unit 2. This is an essential part of prolonging the life of Koeberg, which is, in my humble opinion, a true national asset for a further 20 years. The replacement at Koeberg, Unit 1 of these steam generators is accompanied by a general outage. The unit went off towards the end of last year. Typically this unit generates about 928 megawatts. And that outage, of course, is contributing to the current shortage of generation capacity. It is intended to return to operation by the end of June, and then during the peak demand period during July and August, we will have 2 units operating at Koeberg, and then in September we will take down Unit 2 for its steam generator replacement outage, and then that will also take a further 200 days. And once that is complete, then Koeberg will be back and delivering megawatts to the grid. So we are unfortunately in a perfect storm with Koeberg reaching the end of its operational life, where we need to do significant work to obtain regulatory approval to extend its life, and we are engaged with the regulator in that regard, and everything is on track, but this is accompanied by some major challenges on our coal fleet. Now, in addition, we have had the loss of 3 units at Kusile due to challenges on our flue, the flue carrying emissions from the boilers, and I'll give you more color on that in subsequent slides. Honourable Chair, it is also, I think, important to state that because of a lack of liquidity and because of Eskom's constrained finances, we were unable to run our open cycle gas turbines to their maximum capacity. Now bear in mind that these plants were never designed to be operated as baseload generators, and it would be very inadvisable to consider them as such. But if we had more money available for diesel, the stages of load shedding would have been reduced. I can make that statement categorically. If we had more money available to buy diesel for open cycle gas turbines, the stages of load shedding would have been reduced. Right, if we can move to the next slide then. Thank you, Natasha. The 3 elements that we are looking at for our recovery plan comprise 3 major pillars. The first one is a recovery in our energy availability factor. We are focusing on 6 priority stations, and I'll tell you which those are in a subsequent slide. We are focusing on 10 focus area. I'll also go into that. And we anticipate that we'll be able to return 1,862 megawatts to the grid by March, the end of March of this year. Now that's more or less equivalent to 2 stages of load shedding. We furthermore intend to add 6,000 megawatts over the next 24 months. But we need the skill, we need the money, and we need the time. 3 things that are critical to enable us to carry out this work. The time will be afforded to Eskom by adding additional capacity to the grid. And Honourable Chair, I am very pleased to see the response of the market to the lifting of the cap on own and embedded generation in response to the President's announcement on the 25th of July of last year. We are informed by Operation Vulindlela, located in the Presidency, that there is now a total of 9,200 megawatts worth of projects in the pipeline that will enable us to address load shedding. So, unfortunately, these megawatts do not become available immediately. They take time. Projects need to be executed, but there is an extraordinary amount of activity by investors to respond to this new regulatory dispensation. So that is very pleasing and will afford us huge relief. And ultimately, as I've indicated and as we have been saying for the past 3 years, this will play a major role in bringing an end to load shedding. In order to continue to attract investors to generation, Honourable Chair, Eskom needs to complete legal separation. We need to set up an independent transmission system and market operator in order to give investors the confidence that their bids into a power market will be fairly adjudicated when compared to Eskom generation. If they think that there's going to be an inside track for Eskom generation, they will be loath to invest. We are country number 106, I'm told, to embark on this structural reform. So we are not bleeding edge. We are in fact following a very well-trodden path that other countries have followed for this particular reform. The third element, Honourable Chair, is to focus on certain government enablers, regulatory matters, financial matters, policy alignment between energy policy, environmental policy, fiscal policy, and industrial policy. And here again, and it's not my place to comment on behalf of NCOP, but I can say that I'm hugely encouraged by what I'm seeing happening in NCOP in terms of addressing some of these regulatory and governmental constraints. And it's very pleasing to see the urgency with which these matters are being attended to. We need to address Eskom's financial sustainability. We need to ensure that we can collect money that is due to us. I won't comment on cost-reflective tariffs, that being a particularly sensitive, also litigious topic at this point in time. Safe to say that there are essentially two sources of enabling Eskom to recover its costs, either from those who consume electricity or from the taxpayer by transfers from National Treasury. And that this is a choice that those who make these decisions need to make. I think it is also important to note that people who do not pay for electricity, those who are illegally connected, very typically waste electricity. So they will, during winter time, open an oven door in order to return to your home after work, to a nice toasty home. But of course that oven consumes a lot of electricity, and so it goes. We really need to establish a culture of payment for services in South Africa. We also need to look after the indigent and increase the uptake of the existing free basic electricity grant, which is lower than what one would expect, given the inequality that regrettably still prevails in South Africa. So, essentially the two components: try and recover the coal plant as best we can while adding new capacity. We then move on to the next slide, Chair. As the Eskom board chair has said,
colleagues, the presentation has been circulated, so you've all received it. You all good? Okay, sure. Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. As the Eskom board chair has said, We are currently sitting at an unacceptably low energy availability factor of some 56%. We are working very hard at improving the performance of those stations. In order to make sure that there is no further slippage on this performance, we have to guard the performance at our current flagship stations. Mdntv, Letaba, Matimba, and our peaking stations, our open cycle gas turbines and our pumped storage plants perform really well. And I believe that it is also important that we not only secure the performance of the plant, but that we secure the performance of the people working at that plant. And that we give recognition and reward in order to retain those people, so that we don't lose further skills as evidenced by historical patterns. Now, the top 6 stations that contribute far and away the most to load shedding are Tutuka, Duva, Majuba, Kusile, Matla, and Kengo. Tutuka, Honorable Chair, which is a station that has been characterized by very significant criminality, is running at an energy availability factor currently of between 15 and 17%, 1.5 to 1.7, which is, shall I say, disappointingly low. This is just unacceptable for a station that is one of the newest in our fleet. Honourable Chair, this also happens to be the station where the Power General Manager, when he walks the plant, is to wear a bulletproof vest. He is accompanied by 2 bodyguards. His wife is protected by bodyguards. His kids, when they go to school, are also protected by bodyguards. And this is due to threats to his life and that of his family. So criminality remains an egregious problem in Mpumalanga, and it needs to be addressed very firmly. We need to continue to execute Kubuk 1. And I must say I'm pleased by progress so far. We have made changes to our project management team at Kubuk. I think this committee is aware of those changes, and we are now seeing a very professional approach also augmented by additional resources. We therefore intend to, by the end of our next financial year, in March 2024, achieve 65% energy availability factor. We will then bring into focus the next priority stations, have completed Kubuk 1, busy with Kubuk 2, and then embed the principles of operational excellence. Now, here, if I may just pause for a moment, this is extremely important as part of our cultural transformation. Walking our plants, it is apparent to me and also to members of my management team that basic disciplines such as housekeeping, standard operating procedures, adherence to good maintenance practices have been neglected. And restoring those principles through a structured program of operational excellence is a critical enabler to reinforce the practices that have sadly been neglected. And I may just mention that a tender has now been issued, and we invite all interested parties to respond and submit their bids for operational excellence. We believe that it is a really important lever in order to drive excellence. I would just also remind this committee that at my first appearance at this committee, I wanted to do exactly that, but it got mired in all sorts of accusations of irregularities, and 3 years got wasted as a result. So we need to continue to address the internal skills gap. Honourable Chair, we set up a crowdsourcing platform where we invited South Africans of all races and all genders to submit their CVs. We received more than 1,000 responses. We were very gratified by these responses, and we are now going through all of those CVs to see where there's a match between what's on offer and the skills that we are required to plug. So this is very important. Kusile 5, where we suffered a fire in the gas air heater while the unit was in the hands of the contractor. So this is not an Eskom event, this was a contracting event. After extensive pressure brought to bear on the contractor by our Chief Operating Officer, they have pulled forward the synchronization date of this unit now to July of this year, and that will add a much needed 720 megawatts to the grid, bearing in mind that as the unit is rendered commercial, we will have to take it off from time to time as we do certain tests to confirm that we can accept the unit for commercial operation. But certainly very important unit to add to our capacity. By the following financial year 2025, we therefore intend to achieve 70% plus EAF. Kusile should by then be fully operational. Mdntv 4 will return by September of next year, and that will add significant capacity. We will have to shut down some old stations as they approach their approved dead stop dates. Now this is a contentious issue, I understand, but we cannot continue to operate these units lawfully. Kusile unit, Komati unit 9, apologies, was shut down in October of last year, not because we wanted to, but because we were not able lawfully to continue to operate the unit. And due to the age of these stations, they are extremely expensive to operate. The cost per kilowatt hour at Komati, and it was a very well-run station, was sitting at about R2.71 per kilowatt hour, compared to an average for our coal fleet of about 68 cents. So R2 per kilowatt hour more expensive than the average for our coal fleet. And again, we need to ensure that we add sufficient capacity in time. I may also just add that the shutdown of the stations by Eskom is entirely in compliance with IRP 19. And in fact, we are lagging behind IRP 19. If we had implemented IRP 19 to the letter, we would have shut down these stations earlier than we actually are planning to do. So we are not at loggerheads with government policy. On the contrary, if there's any statement to be made is that we are lagging behind what government policy says in the Integrated Resource Plan 2019. So, Chair, if we can then move on to the next slide. This is the recovery plan for generation. You can see the build-up from a number of units there. That builds up to the 6,000 megawatts. Our concern is, Chair, that this plan relies for a significant part of its recovery on Tutuka. And until we address the criminality that currently prevails in that power station and its environment, we will have a significant risk to cover when it comes to delivering these megawatts to the grid. Of course, we have to attend to a number of factors. Next slide, please, if we can move to the next one. This is not only one lever that we pull. We have to look at least 10 focus areas. We need to improve our plant condition by performing increased maintenance within limitations. These limitations include just the capacity to take units off. There's a balance between load shedding and taking units off for maintenance. We can't just take units off without considering the impact that it will have on our available capacity. Also, liquidity, money. We need money to do this maintenance, and we need skills. We have, based on a recommendation of the board, appointed an international project management company to assist us in ensuring that the actions that are necessary to execute on this plan, that they are closely monitored and that there's an independent verification process in place to give assurance to the board that we are meeting our targets. I spoke to the need to address inadequate capacity, so I will not repeat that. Skills and experience. We do need to have stability in our generation leadership, and we need to make sure that the people that are appointed have the requisite skills. And we are ramping up our training and development. During the period of state capture, the Eskom Academy of Learning was sadly neglected, Chair. And we have now started the process of resurrecting that institution that at one stage was training people from the electricity industry, not only in South Africa, but across Africa itself. So we have had a setback there, which we are recovering from. Fraud and corruption. As I've said, we have increased our governance controls. We are implementing technology to measure coal quality. Even while the truck is in motion, we are installing sampling tools that will sample every truck that is delivering to Eskom by means of an auger on an instantaneous testing. So we can't test all the coal variables, all the coal qualities at the same time, but we can measure the key elements that will indicate if there has been tampering. And this, I think, will go a long way to eliminating the delivery of poor quality coal. But it's, again, not something that we can do on our own. We need the resources of the state to assist us in this regard, and therefore we are again pleased that the President has deployed the South African National Defence Force, and that we are seeing significantly greater action from law enforcement and particularly from SAPS.
Just 1 second, so there's a phone that keeps ringing at the back, and like it's beeping. The next thing is going to ring. So that precursor of the messages, and I've asked when you started. And there's just too much movement, there's too much distractions, and it's just, yeah. Can I just ask that we desist from this PTP that is sort of running parallel the meeting? See, we can continue.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Also on fraud and corruption, there is a criminal justice value chain, if that's the right word, and prosecutions are equally as important. I may just relate one anecdote here that I believe the committee should take note of. At Camden, Eskom Security intercepted a coal truck that contained poor quality coal. It was very apparent that the coal had been replaced with poor quality. When confronted, the truck driver and his so-called manager first of all offered Eskom Security a 50,000 Rand bribe, which was declined. Secondly, after approaching the South African police, the individual was arrested. He made a full confession. The matter was then brought to the attention of the Ermelo Magistrates Court, as is required. The prosecutor there declined to deal with the matter. It was then transferred to Belfast, where the prosecutor in question released the individual without any reference to either Eskom or the South African Police Services. I have brought this matter to the attention of the National Director of Public Prosecutions, and she has indeed acted on it, and we are now seeing significantly better attention being paid to completing the back end of these matters. But it just goes to show that Honourable Chair, really the issues are particularly challenging. and it's not something that Eskom itself can fix. We are on policies and procedures, receiving very good support from National Treasury. I think the relationship with National Treasury has improved very significantly. They still keep us honest. I can give the committee that assurance. They by no means given us blanket exemptions or blank checks. They do maintain good governance, but there's a good degree of practicality and agility from our colleagues at National Treasury. So also my thanks to the team that have come to the table on that one. Funding, we continue to perform aggressive cost cutting, and we are also trying to recover all the monies due to us. But this is a challenge. I know that there is a session scheduled at some stage, Honourable Chair, to deal with the matter of municipal debt, but this is becoming existential for Eskom. We simply cannot have customers not paying to the tune where we are accumulating debt hand over fist. The money's got to come from somewhere, and it's got to come from the people who consume the electricity. That has to be the only solution. Environmental compliance, I made reference to our submission to DFFE. Coal quality, I spoke extensively on that. And then we're addressing the new build defects. We have rolled out the solutions to other units, and I believe if you look at the performance of the 5 operating units at Mdntv, where we regularly exceed an EAF of 90%, I think we can say that the design defects are well understood and that they are being addressed in a comprehensive manner. But it did take us a long time, 2.5 years, and it cost us 165 million rand per unit. So these costs we are still seeking to recover from the contractor in question. That is a contractual process, but the work is continuing. Lastly, we have a subsidiary called Eskom Ruyter Industries, and we've recently appointed a new chief executive to that company, Glick, who is an Eskom veteran. He understands the requirements of the job very well, and we are seeing an improvement in the performance of that very important business. Next slide, please. So if we look at load shedding and the outlook, Honourable Chair, as we look at it today, I will skip the first 2 bullets. It's well known that we have an unreliable and unpredictable plant. We also have Mdntv 4, Kusile 1, 2, 3, and Kuro 1 and Kusile 5. And that, by and large, there is your explanation for load shedding, coupled with a lack of liquidity for the purchase of diesel. There lies the heart of the matter, in addition to the poor foundational performance of the balance of our coal fleet. Our unplanned capacity load factor, our load losses are sitting at 15,491 as at 8 o'clock this morning. We have a planning base of 13,000 megawatts, so we are much higher than the planning base. We have been carrying out substantial maintenance during the summer months. Now this is planned because we want to reduce our planned maintenance during the winter months when there is a higher demand, and we anticipate that this will drop to about 1,000 megawatts during winter. This is how it should work. But of course, as we take units off for planned maintenance, we increase the probability of load shedding. It would be quite easy for my management team and I to say, let's stop load shedding, let's just stop doing planned maintenance, but I think that will help us for about 6 months, and then the solution will become far worse. So unfortunately, the planned maintenance that we have to do in order to catch up on deferred maintenance in the past contributes to the risk of load shedding. So we have indicated, and I'll give you an outlook on load shedding in a subsequent slide, that unfortunately load shedding stage 4 will be maintained until for evening peaks until Friday. because we need to conserve diesel as well as our open cycle gas turbines, as well as preserving our pumped storage reserves. These reserves are very important, Honourable Chair, in order to cater for unforeseen trips. So we need to have, if I can use the analogy, some fuel in the tank to cater for any unplanned outages. And those unplanned outages could occur at any moment due to the lack of reliability of the fleet. And therefore, we have to have that buffer capacity that can be ramped up and deployed very quickly in order to prevent a total system blackout, which is, of course, what we want to avoid at all costs. So the reserves need to be protected and managed very carefully. Honourable Chair, if you'll indulge me, I just want to also give the committee the assurance that the team working at our national control, the system operated team, are a highly competent team of people. They are world-renowned. People come to us to ask for advice on how to operate systems, particularly now that supply of electricity is also constrained in Europe. And they do a really fantastic job. So I can really commend the team and the work that they are doing. We do intend to reduce load shedding, but there will be a residual risk until additional capacity is added. There are also some vacuum load losses. The vacuum load losses are caused by historical design defects at the Mdntv power station. The orientation of the power station relative to the prevailing wind direction, bearing in mind that this is a dry cool power station, does not allow for optimal cooling, and therefore when we have high ambient temperatures, now the Balale, Honourable Chair, is a very hot place, and therefore during the summer months we suffer anything from 700 to 1,000 megawatts of vacuum load losses as the cooling system is inadequate to cope with those high ambient temperatures. And then we're also trying to beef up our capacity to conduct our outages better. If we can then look at the situation as it prevails today, next slide please, Natasha. The units at risk. The units on the screen, Honourable Chair, they appear in black, but actually it should be red.
Colleagues, you've got you've seen the colors. Okay.
Yes.
That's fine. For those that don't have, only 3 are blue and all the rest are red.
Yeah, it's red for
Okay, continue.
I'm not
You won't right into that one.
I'm not making any allusion to color.
There's more red and blue. I like that.
All right. Continue, Asio.
All right. So there are a number of units, Honourable Chair, where we operate with known risks. So let me use Ruyter 2 as an example. It's a small unit, but we know that we have a boiler tube leak. So the boiler is venting steam as we speak. But we are keeping the unit on load in order to keep capacity on the grid. So this is an example of how we try and manage the system that we've got. In an ideal world, when there's a boiler tube leak, you take it off, you fix it, and you return the unit. But because of a lack of capacity, we have to keep on running with this with plant that is not performing optimally. And that gives you an indication that as we sit right here with those units in red, that means that they can trip at any time. And what it means is that we've got just under 5,000 megawatts that are at risk, which gives you an indication of the lack of predictability of the system. And this, of course, is a major concern, and again speaks to the need for us to maintain our reserves in order to protect the overall system. Next slide, please. So the outlook, Honourable Chair, for this morning, load shedding stage 3, and then, as I said, during the evening peaks, load shedding at stage 4, and that will continue. The fourth column from the left, where it says MPLS, that means morning peak load shedding. The column next to it says EPLS, and that means evening peak load shedding. During the evenings, the demand is significantly higher than in the mornings, and we therefore have to unfortunately limit the load more than during the evening peaks. Honourable Chair, it may just also be instructive here to digress for a minute and just talk about the nature of our electricity generation system. The electricity generation system in South Africa was conceived in the 1970s and 1980s. And it was conceived for a very large manufacturing and mining complex and a very small domestic sector. And this is where the concept of baseload originated. So the idea was that the large mines, the large factories, the large energy-intensive smelters would operate 24/7, and they would require a consistent supply of electricity. And there would be a small domestic sector that would contribute to modest peaks. Now, of course, what has happened over the past 30 years or so is that the makeup of the South African economy and the makeup of our electricity market has significantly changed. First of all, our mining sector as a proportion of GDP has contracted. Manufacturing was 27% of GDP in 1994. It is now less than 13%. We have also seen, and this is due to an appropriate, and I commend the decision because it was the right decision, to extend electrification in particular to historically disadvantaged South Africans who were not served by Eskom. But what that has meant is that demand has become far peakier during peak times. So instead of focusing on baseload, we should be focusing on managing our peaks. And this, Honourable Chair, is a change in our electricity market that I believe is not catered for in our current makeup of large, pretty much unresponsive coal-fired power stations. There have been incidents during load shedding where we have had to curtail wind production at night because our coal-fired fleet operated at so-called min-gen. So we can't turn them down any further without shutting them down completely. So our coal plant isn't flexible enough to cater for the demands of the market. And I think this is an important concept to bear in mind when we talk about the future of the electricity market. Honourable Chair, I'm almost done. I know I'm grinding my way through this very slowly, but thank you for indulging me. If we then look at the Kusile Unit 1, 2 and 3 flue duct failure, the flue duct failed on the 23rd of October. It collapsed due to excessive weight imposed on the common support platform. When you drive past the power station or when you visit a power station, you will see two concrete stacks. Now that concrete stack is essentially a windshield, and it contains 3 steel flues. And the flue carrying the emissions from the boiler of Unit 1 collapsed under the weight of slurry that was deposited on the interior of this pipe. Where did the slurry come from? The slurry came from excessively high exhaust gas temperatures, which then lead to higher exhaust gas velocities, and that velocity is increased by the need to add cool air. The technical term for it is attemperation, and the idea is to protect the downstream fabric filter plant, which removes particulate emissions. And what is happening is that as a result of this high velocity of the air, there's carryover from the flue gas desulfurization unit into the flue itself. So again, ultimately root cause probably attributable to two factors. The one is the design defect, the high exhaust gas due to design errors, and then the second one is due to a failure really to control and monitor deposits inside the stack properly. Now, we are looking at a temporary fix for this because we can't simply remove these slurry deposits. What one would typically do is to lower people from the top of the stack, which is 220 meters above ground, into the flues, and then with compressed air lancers they would remove the deposits. The concern, however, is that in doing so we could precipitate an avalanche of slurry that could compromise the overall structural integrity of the stack and lead to a catastrophic collapse. And that, of course, is what we need to avoid at all costs. The plan, therefore, is to build temporary flues, bypassing the flue gas desulfurization unit. Now, for us to bypass the desulfurization unit, we need an exemption from the DFFE. We are already engaged with Minister Kwesi's department, and our application is in the pipeline. It will still take time to build these temporary flues, and we estimate that it will be between 8 and 12 months. So this is again an example of, I think, two issues, ultimately the consequences of corruption, but also skills that were not what they should have been. So if we can then quickly look at some of the pictures, there you can see what happened. On the left-hand side, you can see how the flue separated from the windshield. You can see in the middle picture the deposits that built up. Now bear in mind that this flue has a diameter of 8.9 meters, so this is a big pipe. It is not insignificant. And if you look at the top, the right-hand picture, that is a view looking up inside the stack, and you can see how the flue that collapsed has impinged on the flue for Unit 2 and Unit 3, rendering those two units inoperable. Next slide. There you can see the complete separation. So the unit cannot be operated, we cannot continue to run it. Next slide. This is what it looked like. Now you can imagine to collapse a flue like that, the forces that must be involved is very, very considerable. Next slide. And there you can see why when it fell, when it collapsed, it damaged units 2 and 3 as well, and that caused us to have to shut down all those units. So, Chair, I hope I've given sufficient colour. My team and I are at the disposal of the committee to answer any questions that the members might have, and we thank you for this opportunity.
Right, and thank you very much, CEO, for what has been a very comprehensive brief. I think ultimately the one question that has to be answered after all is said and done, insofar as load shedding is concerned, and noting some of the timelines that have been given, is probably, to use a very common phrase, the question of policy certainty, and of course I say energy certainty, for the economy, for the people, for livelihoods, is for Eskom to tell us, shot like a bullet, when, in your estimation, all factors combined of your planning, some of which you've mentioned here, when will load shedding end? That's the certainty. As cool as it might be, that is required. Because if we do not have a timeline, it makes holding you accountable very difficult. we have to hold you committed to your own commitments. Because this thing can't be open-ended. Because what happens is that somehow people pull out estimates from the sky out of their pockets, depending on which platform they are pressing. No load shedding will be a thing of the past in 16, 18 months, without giving us substantively what informs that 18 months. So, as I was listening, I was hoping that the logical conclusion of everything you will say is to say, all these problems, some of which we have seen when we visited some of your power stations, some of the discussions we've had, some of which we're quite au fait with, some of which is new today. The critical question that an SMME needs to have somewhere in the country, for jobs, for planning, everyone, is to say, this national crisis, national disaster, this calamity that is load shedding, by our own estimation on the basis of the plans we have, will end when? So I want to put that squarely at the center of this discussion, because it helps us for planning, milestones, targets, the whole 9 years. Because I think the time of speaking in vague terms is a thing of the past. I think that's the clarity we need. We need a critical, fundamental response to that key question. When? Don't kill us slowly. You know. Don't string us along. That's the certainty. And there are other issues that I will raise at the end, colleagues, that I just think need clarity. And I'll come to you now. I think let's dispense with this load shedding presentation, and then we'll go to the other issues. The head of unit, stand by. We'll come to you. Let's just wrap up on this issue. I know some of the issues here will probably be issues because we know in the presentations will overlap. The whole issue of design flows and so on is covered in the other presentation. So some of it will be dealt with now. But I think let's dispense with the load shedding one, and then we will move on. Right, colleagues, over to you. Honorable Van Minen, Honorable David, Honorable Sommer, Honorable Lucas. All right. You want to, okay, field your full set of questions, and then they respond, and you come to us and wrap it up, and then we move on, so that we can disturb other presentations.
May I go last?
Well, you will go at my discretion. Right, Honorable Van Minen, over to you. Don't try and co-chair.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And thank you for that very interesting and technical presentation. I've got a number of questions. I'm probably going to combine a number of them together. So essentially, if I can start, we've heard now in several meetings how, really going back to 1998, there have been issues with policy, issues with maintenance, that we're really looking at a political problem that is really now manifesting itself in what's happening with the plants, with the lack of maintenance and everything that's going before it. But the first thing I'd like to ask is, 15 years of load shedding, 25 years of essentially lack of maintenance and all kinds of problems that have happened, design faults, corruption. This turnaround plan, what is different about this turnaround plan? I mean, I think in SCOPA we hear a number of turnaround plans at every single meeting with an enormous amount of departments. And why is this one apparently going to be successful? Also, we've had a number of sort of wild cards thrown in there as to things that could disrail it. So I think let's unpack that. Then going back to the issue of the aging fleet, and I mean we've dealt extensively in the last 4 years with Mdntv and Kusila. We're now hearing about a number of really problematic older power stations, Tutuka, Kendal, You were talking about the criminality at Tuka. What kind of issues are that? You know, I mean, obviously it's a much bigger issue. You can just put it into a simple presentation, but if you can highlight some of that. And in terms of reconditioning the older plants, I mean, this does to a certain extent also touch on Kuba, which would extend its life by 20 years. We've seen how quickly 25 years goes past when things aren't done properly. So 20 years is actually a very short time period. So what is worth reconditioning? How long will it take to do that reconditioning? And essentially, what's the payoff? I mean, you can recondition an old plant, but if you're going to have to turn it off anyway in 2 years' time, is that actually a viable spend? Is it something that should be done? Then going to the issue of the diesel and the need to procure more diesel, which obviously means that there needs to be a lot more money thrown into that particular issue. What initiatives are currently happening, particularly with regards to the relevant ministries? Is work being done to move money in that regard? Also, we're hearing a lot of different stories across the country and across society about the reasons for a lot of the outages and the sabotage and the breakages and everything. I mean, literally from, on the one hand, it's a conspiracy so that it's to essentially allow political party maneuvering to do with power ships. On the other hand, it is sabotage to push for privatization. I mean, it's a whole conglomeration of things. In real terms, what is really going on with the sabotage? Is it criminality? Is it aging fleet? Is it deliberate? Is it a combination of all those factors? That also ties in with what was being said about assistance from law enforcement. And to touch on the coal issue, I mean, obviously one can't put anything out there that one doesn't want in the public, but talking about intelligence operations, is progress being made with determining what is happening with the coal issues and the sabotage? Because I assume it's not just individual drivers. I assume it's a much, much bigger network, connects to all kinds of things. I think we also touched on it in the last meeting. The municipal debt issue. This is also something that has been extensively discussed when we have these meetings with SCOPA. Does the Eskom board have a particular opinion on the talks about large write-offs for certain areas? Is that something that has been discussed? And if there were to be large write-offs for certain areas vis-a-vis other areas, what would the way forward be then? Would that be a line in the sand to say, yes, there is a certain amount of debt from area X? If it was written off by government, what would the way forward be so that that doesn't then happen again? The FTG plant at Kusile is obviously a roadblock in capacity generation. What's going to happen when these plants are installed in other power stations? I know that they are supposed to be coming into Mdntv as well. The legal separation, how far is legal separation of Eskom at this point? And what is going to be happening next in this process? We also just look at that. I think that's all of it for now, except as a point of interest, looking at the issue of peaks. It seems to be a bigger peak over weekends. Now, maybe I'm just not seeing the whole picture, but why are we seeing larger peaks during weekend periods than we are during the week? I mean, I understand what's been said about manufacturing and mining no longer being as large as they previously were, but it suddenly seems on Saturday mornings and Sundays there's a much bigger peak there. And then how does that pattern also change in winter? I think that's all for now, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, let's get responses to that, and then we'll move on to Honorable Samuel. Actually, proceed. We'll take a member's full set of questions and so nothing gets lost.
Thank you, Chair. I will respond high level, but I think most of the questions are largely operational, so my colleagues from the executive team will respond. I think from a board perspective, if I were to deal with this question of what do we see as going to happen differently. Firstly, I think we sought to create checks and balances, as the group chief executive has indicated. We're going to be finalizing pretty soon a contract with an independent service provider that is going to almost create a check and balance system that as and when we do a systems update or receive a systems update from our executive colleagues, firstly the board committee responsible is able to leverage that independent technical second opinion, if you like, to corroborate that what we are communicating would actually be what is the reality. So I think that's firstly different. So you will not just be hearing internal messaging from Eskom. There will be an independent validator that will be able to say, actually, we agree, concur, disagree. The key needle shifter is the almost value chain alignment that we've now accomplished through our participation in the NCOP. As early as last night, there was this idea that was shared in NCOP of driving these processes through what is being referred to as an action lab. So you now have a situation where, as and when there's a major interconnected decision that has to be made, all those decision makers are placed in one room, ranging from whoever that has to decide on an exemption, where an exemption is needed, right across to whoever that must respond on whether there's going to be funding for this or the other. So for instance, last night we are now clearer in terms of the funding model for diesel, so there's certainty there. We are clear on a whole host of issues that we didn't have certainty, because the nature of government is public service anywhere in the world is bureaucratic. So the bureaucracy has been minimized quite significantly, so that there's a sense of seamlessness as and when a particular variable of a turnaround plan has to be decided upon for execution. So I think those are some of the differentiating factors. There's greater agency on both sides, on government side, on Eskom side, and there's greater alignment and collaboration across the value chain. And internally, from a board point of view, we then have these checks and balances that we put in place. But I think looking at the rest of the questions, really, they are largely operational. Legal separation, the board governance and strategy committee that I chair is already on that matter. We actually, last week, 17, 18, 19 January, had a comprehensive board offsite at the academy, where we looked beyond just the turnaround plan in generations, but looked at the broader Eskom 2035 strategy. And within that, we had quite a comprehensive conversation on the legal separation. And so it is prioritized and will be driven quite vigorously as well from the board program point of view. So I'll leave to GCE, and maybe with your discretion, GCE, our CFO can speak to some of the municipal debt matters as well. But all these matters are on our executive execution program, so to speak. I'll let you know.
Thank you, Chair. Honourable Chair, through you, if I can continue. Honourable from there, I think what's different, it's not so much the content of the plan as the way in which we intend to execute it. So I think it's become a truism to say that South Africa is great at planning but very poor at execution. So we hope to break that pattern. Criminality at Tutuka. a fish struggles to swim in a toxic stream. And unfortunately, there's a broader societal issue surrounding Standerton, and that, I think, gives rise to these cartels that operate. If I can give you some details. For example, we know that if someone has a maintenance contract for mills, then there will be rocks or metal added to the coal to destroy the mills, so that there's a maintenance call out. We stopped the theft of 100 million rand a month of fuel oil at Tutuka. We were able to effect 2 arrests. The 2 suspects were released on derisory bail of 500 rand each the following day, and that case has not yet been finalized. We had to write off inventory somewhere along the lines of 1.3 billion rand when we tried to impose control by implementing barcoding. Those efforts were significantly resisted internally. I can regale you with all of the ins and outs. So the criminality is quite well organized and is very deeply embedded. So just fixing that is not an easy task, and the resistance to implementing, for example, pretty basic control measures sometimes goes to extraordinary lengths. Fuel oil, for example, at one stage, a submission was made by certain procurement officials to the Generation Board proposing the award of a 432 million rand contract to an individual who, after due diligence performed at my request, turned out to be operating from a suburban home in Germiston. He had his car repossessed, and he had a judgment against him for falling behind on payments for his house. And he was submitted as a bona fide supplier of fuel oil. All 3 of the procurement officials were suspended, 1 left on 24 hours notice. But if the attempts are ongoing, and it's not only external, it's also regretted internal. And here I don't want to cast any aspersions on the bulk of Eskom employees who are hardworking, honest and diligent. Honourable Chair, should we be looking at extending the life of old plants versus replacing it with new capacity? We have looked at this very extensively. First of all, we need to make the plant, as Honourable Van Minen indicated, compliant with environmental legislation. This requires us to spend more than 300 billion rand on plant that, according to the ILP, should be decommissioned imminently. So you end up in a strange situation, and that's why I urge alignment between environmental policy and energy policy. That as you start up your FGD plant, you shut down the coal plant that you are intending to improve the emissions of. So it really doesn't make economic sense. And hence, our submission to the FFE is rather that we divert the funds to creating new capacity. We believe that that's a far more sustainable way of, and a far more prudent allocation of funds, rather than to try and address in a compliant way, which we have to do, emission restrictions on plant that are at end of life. The cost of extending a plant's life, economic life, are very high, because the spares are hard to obtain. In many instances where we have already retired certain units at our older plants, and here I'm specifically referring to Indrina and Grootfontein, those units that have been standing have been cannibalized for spares. So when you go into those units, there's not a lot left. So it's not as though we can, that they are standing idle and that there's capacity that we can start at a moment's notice. If that had been the case, obviously we would have done it, but it's not feasible. So we've done technical work on extending the life of plant. It would cost us to get 550 megawatts in Reno, about 16 billion rand, to get 5 years of plant. And again, the question is, do you then reallocate that to capacity that will last for 20 years rather than only 5 years? What is the economically prudent decision? Similarly, at Grootfontein, 22 billion rand for 720 megawatts for 5 years. And that excludes the cost of coal, it excludes the cost of compliance. So we have done the work, and we've come to the conclusion that extending the life of these old units really does not make sense. In addition to the fact, as I've indicated with my reference to the cost of electricity generated at Kumati, it is not competitive. When you compare it to other technologies that are a fraction of the price and are environmentally compliant. The root cause for sabotage, Honourable Chair, I'm not trying to duck the question, but I don't believe it's our space as Eskom to speculate on the motives of those who indulge in these things. I would prefer not to go there, with your permission. I think that's a question for the intelligence agencies, if I may. The municipal debt remains a perennial problem. We have gone to all the measures that we can. We are strictly enforcing nominated maximum demand. We understand that this causes significant hardship in those municipalities where some people do pay their accounts diligently to the municipality. The municipality, for whatever reason, doesn't pay the money over to Eskom. Now, with respect, Honourable Chair, I believe the responsibility for this should not lie with Eskom. The responsibility should lie with the councils and the municipalities who do not pay Eskom. Surely those are the people to hold accountable and not Eskom. We have a business to operate, we have revenue to collect, and we can't go into municipalities and collect on their behalf. We have suggested active partnering approaches where we go in and we assist municipalities to carry out maintenance, to improve their billing, to install smart meters, to avoid electricity theft and meter tampering. The stumbling block, Honourable Chair, where essentially all of these negotiations, with the exception of 3 municipalities, fail, is that we insist that the revenue thus collected be paid over into an Eskom bank account rather than a municipal bank account. And then the discussions come to an end for reasons that we can all speculate about. So the municipal debt remains a structural problem. We are attaching movable assets, we're attaching bank accounts, and again we understand that this impacts service delivery. But when we are not able to, as we do with our major industrial customers, if they don't pay us, we cut them off. And then miraculously the money is found and they pay us and electricity supply resumes. If you cannot enforce payment by cutting off electricity, then you have to do other things. And those other things are what we are having to do. The FGD plant at Mdntv, yes, we are proceeding with that project. So there's a firm intent to comply with our obligations in that regard. But we do believe that we need to take very clear lessons from our experience at Kusile, make sure that we operate the plant with skilled operators, that we understand the technology, bearing in mind that FGD was a first for Eskom at Kusile, and I think we probably underestimated the complexity of operating that plant and hence our difficulties. On legal separation, from an Eskom perspective, we have put everything in place to enable the legal separation of transmission, that being the key enabler of additional investment in electricity generation capacity. We have signed with the entity that we've established, the National Transmission Company South Africa Limited, a wholly owned subsidiary of Eskom Holdings. We have signed an asset transfer agreement. We are engaging with lenders to obtain their consent. Understandably, lenders to Eskom are concerned that we could possibly be alienating the jewel in the crown. The transmission business is a good business, and it earns very predictable revenues. So those discussions are progressing well, but there are a number of regulatory consents and transfers of licenses that we are dependent on. We also need to appoint a full-time board, which ultimately is a shareholder decision, and we are engaging with our shareholder to try and resolve those matters as soon as we can. From the market, Honourable Van Minne's observation that the market dynamics are changing is very true. Some of it is due to the fact that more and more people are installing inverters and batteries. And therefore, when load shedding is over, there's an additional spike as those batteries get recharged. So the effectiveness of load shedding is diminishing. There are estimates by the South African Photovoltaic Industry Association that there's as much as 1 gigawatt a year of rooftop solar that is being added by private households. And we certainly see that when it's overcast in Gauteng, that there's a significant increase in demand on the system. So the market is dynamic, it's changing all the time. And therefore, when we think about the electricity market, I think it's very important that we have an agile view of the market. To view it through a 1980s lens, I think is just not appropriate. We need to think about current technologies, current environmental trends, current consumption patterns, and current cost structures, and then we can make informed decisions. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
I thought my initial question would have received a response. I'm not going to let up on that. And then on the issue of municipal debt, that meeting is scheduled for the 21st of Feb. So I think that's important to note in light of the issues that have been raised. And to say, whilst we encourage municipalities to pay Eskom, Eskom itself must service its own municipal bills in its offices throughout the country. I was just reading over the weekend how Mdntv has had to cut off some Eskom offices because Eskom is owing the municipality to pay. So the 21st will be very interesting because you recall Minister Delil appeared here. And there's quite a number of queries about and discrepancies about the bills that Eskom has and vice versa, and so far as municipalities. You'll remember that meeting we had in 2020, just about the start. So let's flag those issues, colleagues, around Eskom debt for the 21st of Feb, where we'll have a full discussion on that. But my original question, over to you.
Honourable Chair, I make any forecast about load shedding with great trepidation because it's to a very large extent out of Eskom's hands. I think it should be recognised that since the responsibility for the procurement of additional generation capacity was placed in the hands of the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy and the Independent Power Producer Office, Eskom can no longer be regarded as the supplier of last resort. So we are going through a stage in our electricity industry where additional capacity is required now that the cap on embedded generation has been lifted. Of course, anyone can add new capacity. But before the cap was lifted from 1 megawatt, which it had been historically, all new capacity had to obtain Section 34 approval in terms of the Electricity Regulation Act from the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy. So those decisions lie in the hands of the department as well as of NERSA, who have to provide concurrence to requests to build. And you may have seen that a request by Eskom to build a 3,000 megawatt gas-fired power station was turned down by NERSA because they said that we should have applied for a Section 10.2 instead of a Section 34. But we'll resolve that through our engagements. So when will load shedding end? I will try and answer your question, Honourable Chair, by referring to the risk of load shedding. The 9,200 megawatts coming online, and we anticipated that trend will continue and will continue to grow. There's huge activity going on in terms of investing in new generation capacity that will be brought online in relatively short order. So the risk of load shedding will substantially diminish in the next 18 months. Will it be eliminated? I think that will be a brave person to make that categorical statement. But having regard to our own turnaround plans and the fact that we are seeing substantial new capacity being added, we should see the risk diminish. Having said that, I think it's extremely important that we do not lose momentum, that we carry on adding new capacity, and that we continue to invest in the electricity industry, and in particular to invest in our transmission grid, which is the enabler of adding new generation capacity. It's not only about building new power plants, it's also about connecting the power plants to the consumers. And this is what we need to keep on doing. It's an integrated system. It's not limited to only building plants. So that would be my forecast with a health warning. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
I don't want to eat into more of the time. I'm going to come back to that. Also, over to you. We'll take off someone's question and then we'll take a question. And then I think when we're done, we'll take a 5-minute comfort break and then we'll come back.
Was that mentioned in the bank? Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to the Eskom team led by the Chair of the Board, the AG and colleagues, SIU as well. Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation. I think the presentation comes forward as looking into a thread of performance related matters, both in terms of the actual presented instances and what is planned going forward. But when I looked into exactly on the area that relates to performance, it's called performance, mainly on the planned improvement in as far as the electricity availability. One becomes to be so worried, in a sense, looking into the actual instance. If you look into the assessment by the auditors through their report outcomes, the key performance area there relates to improve plant operations. On the improvement of the plant operations, Eskom's plan has been, just on that, as per their own target, has been 74% for the year 2021-2022. actual performance is reported as being 62.02%. But the CEO is telling us that there is a planned movement by 2024 to 65%. And one would want to be assured in as far as what is it that is going to bring that amount of improvement when there is a downscaling of such performance as it is assured by the actual outcome of the audit as we see it now. And in such instances, one would want to make some reference on the losses that have been as well somewhat extensively seen, the actuals, the actual loss, not in the applicable instance. In your plan, you have planned 10.5% and you have realized the actual 10.3%, which is lower than the actual mark in terms of what you would have foreseen. In the same equation, you would find that the unplanned partial load losses would have been at the range of 3,969 megawatts, and the actual realized is more than that, which goes to 4,851 megawatts. So all these variables are amounting to climb to realize what you're putting forth as your achievement to reach the foreseeable 65% in terms of the electricity availability factor. And that in itself goes against what you would have planned, foreseen, prepared, and account for in terms of your actual realizable performance. And you fail to realize that level of performance. And what is it, therefore, that is going to bring that a kind of change if you are going to be dealing with that in terms of dealing with the areas of load shedding? There are a number of those variables. I can count a number of those as per the outcome of the audit, which are creating somewhat a bleak picture in as far as the realization of the target as you would want to get into it in as far as your actual philosophy, which itself presents some form of a worrisome factor if you look into the outage loss, which has been in the old philosophy 15% realized, which goes to 29.74% in terms of the audit outcome. So the realization of those instances to count for effective fight in as far as load shedding is concerned. If you look into these kinds of figures, they account for somewhat a mountain as far as your own performance is concerned. This is what the board should look into your performance, should look into the institution's performance, and be assured that some positive results are going to be what you are talking about as far as your achievements in 2024 is concerned. And then I look into, put that aside, look into your statement is saying that if there was money for diesel, I'm paraphrasing it. You put it somewhat different, but you're saying if there is money for diesel, enough money for diesel, you would have reduced the current flow as far as load shedding is concerned. And I look into one presentation, I'm sure the SRU is going to come into that in terms of their own presentation on the proclamation R18. I think it's proclamation R18, which refers to diesel. That proclamation, they are doing investigations which amount to about 2.435 and some odd billion rands of diesel which has been procured by Eskom during a particular period, which itself has been an ad hoc exercise in terms of procurement. So don't you think that is wise to balance that, because you know then that you are operating in an environment where you would need diesel. So there is absolutely no need to venture into ad hoc exercise in terms of your procurement of such an amount which is going to be queried in terms of its own regularity. And you chose to get into such procurement and risking the fact which is going to fly towards a high price because the call at the time is of an emergency and depends on the pool of those who exist as service providers in as far as your published availability of such service providers, rather than making a defined call for procuring a service which is going to continue to be what you need. So looking at that against what you say, the statement is saying if we had money for diesel, would reduce this effect. But I'm just posing this question to yourself, that in Eskom, a model of procurement of emergency on a service that they know would need, and therefore if we need it, we might get it cheaper than it has been. We choose an emergency form of procuring that service, and therefore reduces and exposes the risk of a higher prices than what we want to benefit from. The third point, Chairperson, is on the Note 3 by National Treasury, which has assisted some of the procurement of services, though I will delve on it sometime later on that, looking into the amounts and the confirmation of perpetual corruption exercises, which are continuously eating into what the board chair referred to, amounting to financial sustainability of Eskom, and therefore you would want to look into the practical instances which would have somewhat been averted, looking into other things in as far as that exercise is somewhat concerned. The last area which I would wanted to deal with, I've only had, there was a point which the CEO referred to, that in his past 3 years, he wanted to procure a service. It's only now that he has succeeded to do so. Earlier on, that was queried as amounting to administrative maladministration in a way, and it's only now that he is delving into that, and therefore the tender has been somewhat published in that regard, and I wanted to check as to what are the elements of such perceived maladministration in as far as the item he made reference to. Other matters are more linked to the areas which I would want to speak on, Chair, when we receive other the benefit of other presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will have to stand by and take responses to those questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. Perhaps before the CEO responds, we might want to check whether the Chair of ARC wants to have any comments on some of these comments, because they relate to also some of the work that the committee is involved with. But I suspect on the diesel question that Honorable Somyo asked, maybe the CEO should have said, had there been, because it's a matter of statement of a past set of conditions compared to where we are now. Because as early as last week, when we ourselves were in a board Oversight, we also spoke at length to the members of the IFC in board's Investment and Finance Committee for a little bit more robust planning of our diesel funding model looking forward. And as I said earlier in my opening remarks last night, we also came to a conclusion that the diesel funding model moving forward is now sorted out. But the CEO will comment specifically, but I don't know if the Chair of ARC wants to tell any voiceover perspectives.
Good morning, everybody. Just to give some feedback, the new formed ARC since October has met 7 times, or 8 meetings this Friday. And primarily our concern was getting the audit across the line, while at the same time looking at internal controls and assurance and forensics function. Many of you may have read the audit report in the annual financial statements, but just to give you a summary in terms of our conclusions and the work that needs to be done going forward, is we did find that there was a need, particularly in the finance organization, for technical financial skills, which became quite evident in the restatement of numbers from the previous years. And what we found was that there was a very strong need for as well as for finance business partnering. So really, finance is as a trusted advisor to the business in terms of decisions going forward. Whilst we found that the systems and the processes for risk management was adequate, there was definitely a need for improvement in terms of the effectiveness thereof. And we also found that while there's very well documented policies and procedures, the application of it, the execution of it was lacking in the business. And that's where the strong business partnering from finance into the organization will assist. Internal controls, wherever there was internal controls and there was a breakdown, we found that there's a need for compensating measures. So you need to either put more people into it, more review measures in place, and that's just something that you need to move away from having compensating measures and rely on a sound control environment so that you can base reliability on numbers. And overall, consequence management just needs to be improved. There's just not enough accountability being driven in the business, and that just needs to be improved. While there was an investment in the assurance and forensics function that works very closely with the various bodies, there's still a need in terms of more investment of skills resources and really defining their mandate and their independence in the organization to execute on their functions. And really, the combined assurance model that has been adopted by Eskom, we found that the level of the external auditors, especially with the change over to the new auditors, was effective. But as you go deeper into the organization, it needs to be more robust. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen, and the assurance and the audit committee remains very vested and quite high touch with the business. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Khan. Can I hand over to CEO?
Thank you, Chair. Honourable Chair, Honourable Sonia, yes, indeed, we had targets for our energy availability factor, and consistent with those targets, also the unplanned load losses. Regrettably, due to the performance of our generation fleet, we did not achieve those targets, and that's the difference between the actual and the target numbers that you alluded to in your comments. And you are absolutely right that we do have a mountain to climb to improve the performance of our generation fleet. Having regard to all of the factors that I mentioned, the age of the fleet, the poor condition of the fleet, lack of skills, corruption, changes to important variables, including coal, policy matters, and so forth, you are spot on. We do have a mountain to climb. It is going to be a challenge. But I do think that, as I mentioned when I responded to the Honourable Vermanen, that we are focusing very strongly on execution and capacitating ourselves to execute, also by bringing in support from a project management and execution perspective. So I trust that we will be able to deliver better results. When it comes to diesel, and again, as a consequence of the poor performance from our generation fleet, due to the fact that when we had our budget discussions, we set ourselves a target for the performance of our coal fleet in particular. And that then leads you to setting a budget for your diesel that you will consume during the financial year. Now, of course, if your coal fleet then doesn't perform, then you have to buy more diesel, and that's exactly what has happened. The diesel that we did purchase, we maintained all appropriate controls on expansions and deviations, so good governance was maintained. I may just add that we buy the majority of our diesel from a fellow state-owned enterprise, Petro SA, and we think that the expansions of our contracts, therefore, were in keeping with good contract management, and we tried to, and we in fact did, maintain appropriate contractual controls to ensure that we did not fall foul of any irregularity. I think the one element to also mention is that, of course, the price of diesel itself, due to the crisis resulting from the invasion of Ukraine, as well as weakening in the rand, contributed significantly to an increase in the oil price, and that then led to also a change in assumption. So there were two variables. It was volume and price. The biggest variable by far was volume, but price also really played a role. I think the chair of the Eskom board is 100% correct. If we had more money available for diesel, we could have avoided some stages of load shedding. That I think is a statement of fact. And then, as I mentioned, we do have very good support from National Treasury. I think the asset and liability team are playing a constructive role, and they are also working with us on addressing balance sheet issues. And I'm quite comfortable with how we are collaborating to ensure that procurement is done in a compliant way, but also that we are not strangled and red tape, and that the business comes to a standstill. So I think we found quite a reasonable balance between us in order to achieve that. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you very much. This diesel thing we'll have to come back to it when we deal with the expansions and deviations reports, which we have consistent with the note 3 issues that you've raised, Babuson. We'll come back to it. If they don't have it now, maybe in the next session now, just look at it. But I think there's merit in looking at it. Because the phrase, if we had more money, it leads us to the other things like there could be more money at Eskom if the other things are done right. So it becomes first and foremost an internal arrangement of prudent financial management. But what we load here is bailouts, and this NESA thing is just not sitting well. All right.
I think you're putting correctly that the catch is not on more money or not on more money. If you have it, manage it appropriately. Maximal proper usage of such amount, because there are, I think the chair of the board made reference to their discussions yesterday. That is to phrase it. It is a funding model, you see, which is very critical. If you run your plants, and diesel now has become one of major choices. We've seen this thing in Kusile, the pile of coal. The tons of coal, because your major source is coal, and if then you're changing to diesel in terms of other things there, it tells you that you must have readily available some amount of diesel. If you do so, your model should change. You should not have an abrupt procuring of such, you see, service in terms of provision. So maybe if you could avail to us, maybe share through you their approach around diesel funding. What is it that they have in terms of their own change? Because as the CEO has referred to it, reduction of load shedding would have benefited from such. You see, if that is the case, then what is that they're bringing into the equation in terms of fighting this kind of sporadic sharing of load in as far as electricity is concerned? So I think that's where we want to go. Thank you very much, Chair.
I think there's one issue that one also raised was around the 3-year delay in the procurement that the CEO referred to earlier on. I would suspect it's the issue that arose out of our 2019-2020 meeting, and I flagged it when the board was here in October around the PFMA. I think that's the issue I was referring to. So, yes. Yeah, so in 2019-2020, when Eskom appeared, CEO raised the matter around companies which were to be identified to provide a service. But then the issue was then raised, and National Treasury wrote to the CEO to advise him that there were PFMA processes to be followed. I think that's the delay is referring to, but I can clarify. I just thought, also when they said it, I remembered, because National Treasury then inquired with me, and I said they can proceed to write to the CEO around those PFMA matters. Hence, in the last meeting, I was saying to the board, as they come into this space, an assessment of fresh set of eyes on the limitations of the PFMA on utility and so on. So let's get a response from it, but I'm putting it in context with that 3 years I remember quite vividly. So yes, then Honorable Hatta will come in. Let's just get a response to that question Honorable Sonia raised. Theo?
Chair, your recollection is absolutely correct, and I've got nothing further to add. Chair, if I may just remind you with respect of the body break that you promised.
Oh yes, then there's that. All right. Let's push just a little bit more. Just a teeny bit. I know coffee can cause problems, but let's get Honorable Hadebe when he's done and we get responses. We'll take a comfort break, and then Honorable Paulson, you will come in, and then Honorable Lucas. Right, Honorable Hadebe?
Yeah. The next, I can just ask a few because I've got a lot of questions. I can ask about 1 or 2, and then we take the break. My interest, Chair, is ending load shedding or reducing the level of load shedding. Nothing else. And the question will follow from what Honorable Sonia has raised. If you had enough money to buy this for open cycle gas turbine to be used during the peak period. Now, that's an option available at our disposal to reduce load shedding, and you are giving that option to us. The question is, how much will it cost for you to get what you want, and what have you done about it? Is that cost less than the current burden imposed on South Africans economically, in terms of their livelihood, the rate of crime that is escalating during the load shedding? And if that option is viable, why haven't we implemented it? Or which relevant ministry have you approached? Clearly, this situation cannot go on unattended. Don't you think that warrants us declaring the current situation as a national disaster in order for us to reprioritize and direct funding for you to be able to have sufficient diesel to reduce the amount of load shedding? Personally, from where I am and the inconveniences that I've experienced, both personally and to the livelihood of ordinary South Africans, companies closing down, chickens dying, and all that, I think this warrant a declaration of the national disaster for you to have the reasonable amount of funding for you to reduce load shedding. That's the first question that I would like to get clarity on. The second question, Chair, I'm concerned. You talk about independent international company with international experience in engineering to play monitoring and management of the implementation of your plan. That's more like outsourcing your roles and responsibilities. You have the board, you have engineers, you have technicians, and general staff within Eskom, saying all that human resource and capabilities, none of you are capable of managing, monitoring the implementation of your plan. You need an international company to do what Eskom ought to be doing. Is that in line with the provision of the PFMA in terms of outsourcing your services? What will happen to those charged with the responsibility of playing the role that will be played by this international company? Are we not paying double for one service? Surely there are staff, engineers, and management within Eskom who ought to play that role of monitoring. You are saying let's go outside and get an international company. those that are currently there, what will happen to them? Have you compiled or conducted a skills audit that will tell you exactly what is it that you don't have vis-a-vis what you have? Can you tell us right now that the reason why we're opting to outsource our services, we don't have so many engineers, we don't have so many technicians, we'll need so much until this period of time? Do you have that plan? The next question, Chair, the 2-year turnaround plan, where is it? I often say you cannot manage that which you cannot measure. Do you have the milestone projections within your 2-year turnaround plan? Does that plan include ending load shedding? Within your plan, what is the projected time frame to end load shedding? Or your 2-year turnaround plan only speaks about reducing load shedding? I would be comfortable sitting where I am if within your 2-year plan there is a milestone projection that will say on this date we are going to end load shedding, or on this date we will have reduced load shedding by so much. The energy availability factor would have been increased by so much. You just touched on the plan. I understand because we called you on the 11th hour. You could not have all the documents readily available at our disposal. But it always assists when you refer to a document, that document is before us for our perusal, so that whatever question you pose are informed by us thoroughly accessing the plan. Now we're assuming what is entailed and contained within that plan. But my discomfort again, Chairperson, the only structure that is new currently is the board. You've been in office for more than 100 years. 100 days, sorry. You've been in office for more than 100 days. All the other established management has been there. The group chief executive, you've been there for 3 years now. It can therefore be what is giving us a plan as if it's a new entity that had not been there in the past. What happened to the other plans? How many times are we going to sit here and be given new plans every time a new structure comes into office? We're operating as if there was nothing. The group CEO has been there. He could have easily unpacked what were the plans in place, not unless what the services that has rendered by him for the past 3 years is not yielding the desired outcome in terms of fixing the mess at Eskom. Hence you spend your 100 days starting from the scratch. Because that's what it means, Chair. Having a new plan is that after having assessed the situation, we felt we need to do our own thing and start from the scratch. And that speaks volume about the 3 years that you have spent in office, Group Chief Executive. Why do you act as if there was nothing there before? Or what was there is not good enough to fix the current challenges at Eskom, Chair? I want to continue with other questions, but for the sake of giving the board and the group CEO a comfort break, Chair, I will end with those questions with an understanding that after break I will continue, so that I don't bombard them with a lot of questions at the time.
Right, let's get responses to those 3 areas, and then just on the issue of the international project management, the Honorable Ruyter has raised the issue of the private intelligence and investigators that were roped in. If we can also get details about that as well, in terms of the material facts which led to that particular action step that the CEO actually raised. In as much as there was a qualification to say the situation has improved, but I think that it links to what he's saying. The constant need for Eskom to outsource certain functions and responsibilities is in itself raising questions, because what it leads to, Chair, is the ongoing, observation and criticism that Eskom is overstaffed. So we've got the bloated establishment, and yet you are continuously outsourcing, unless that's not the case. So I think let's go on the 3 issues, and then when we're done, we'll take a comfort break.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Honourable Khalil. I think there's perhaps areas when we spoke where we may not have been as clear as we had hoped we were. But on this matter of national disaster, I think it should be painfully clear to all of us in the House that that's outside the purview of Eskom to pronounce or not pronounce on how progress can go in that direction. However, the relevant departments that participate in NCOP have constantly been reviewing this, including legal opinions on when and how does our country statutory frameworks allow for a declaration of a national disaster. But I would be loath, Chair, that Eskom be the one to make those pronouncements here, because it's outside of our purview. I thought the Group CEO was quite clear earlier. I mean, there's a technical response on when do you end load shedding. Load shedding improves, or load shedding gets minimized when you improve your energy availability factor. Once your eligibility factor goes above the 60s and starts hovering towards your 75th percentiles, you have a grid that is as world class as any. Because let's remember that globally there is no such thing as 100% energy availability. Utilities are global entities that are benchmarked according to global practices. Anywhere in the world, even in the best run economy in the world, energy availability factor is deemed normal if it's around 80-86%, because at any given time you'll have plants that are offline for maintenance. So it should be accepted, therefore, that once you are at 65% heading towards 70 and post-2025 heading above 70, you are now operating towards those world-class norms. So our 2-year plan takes all those factors into account, and I think maybe it might be worthwhile, without sounding perhaps out of turn, to maybe unpack these thematically next time we come, because as it is pointed out today, we're not quite clear what we're going to be largely focusing on. But I just thought those, useful points might be worthwhile putting in the group. On this global firm is an initiative that the new board discussed with management, because, as I said earlier, we want to relieve each other, management and the Eskom board, in the legal sense of Eskom board, of the challenge where you give a systems status update and people, because there's more energy experts in the market than there is Eskom, and you find all manner of experts poking holes at the status report, and so you can't have Eskom marking its own homework on the information that it gives. So it allows us to have that matter of checks and balances. In strict terms, it's not outsourcing. It's actually adding new capabilities into the dialogue. But most critical, what we'll still do is embedded in this agreement that will be signed. There will be skills transfer, there will be all the good things that go with the need for localization. But if we are to have credibility in the eyes of South Africa, you need to have this independent voice that is able to say, we verify what the country is being told in terms of, as I think Andre used the term, are they hitting the requisite targets that they say they will hit relative to this turnaround journey. I do think if we look back to the first slide that our group CEO opened with in terms of the journey map that we went through as a utility in terms of the different choices that were made, should have made around energy. There's an important piece of information I think we should maybe add there. In 2017, we once came into one of the House of the committees in the House of Parliament, where it was blatantly clear that there was a huge gap where, in fact, prior to 2017, sorry, in 2008, after the first load shedding, when the build program commenced, it was quite interesting at the time that there was a commitment to build new power stations without a funding model. And we had to go through quite an elaborate process of putting a funding model in place at that time. And what we learned then, those who were decision makers on the board, the build program that gave us initially MDNTV and subsequently Kusile at the time, it was the 4th largest build in the world. And that talks to the level of complexity that perhaps may well have been underestimated at that time. And I think Andre spoke at length about how there was lots of steep learning curves as that build program unfolded. And so it's important that in this turnaround plan and in all the initiatives we're doing right now, we must remember that we're also dealing with some of the remnants of those levels of complexity that were not adequately thought through, prepared for. And it does help to have a fresh pair of eyes alongside any execution plan to make sure that future generations don't come later and scorn on what we're doing today and say, why did you think about this or the other? And if we want to really ensure that we turn around for good, we have to build all the necessary safety nets to make sure that that becomes the case. And really that's where we're coming from a strategic intent point of view.
Thank you, Chair. If I can ask our CFO, Kasim, to just give us an overview of the amount initially budgeted for diesel, what we ended up spending, and what is required. Thank you.
Thanks, Honorable Chair. For this financial year, we started the financial year with a budget of 8 billion rand. We're assuming a load factor of about 6% during the course of the year, obviously on the assumption that EAF would